Good day, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of What the Why with Barbara Ann on RVN Television. If you haven't seen us before, our show features conversations with diverse leaders from all walks of life about why they do what they do and how they figured things out. Maybe you are sick and tired of feeling sick and tired, or you feel stuck and want to get unstuck in your business, job, or life. All of our guests have something in common with you. At some point in their lives, they felt similarly. And today is no exception, although he's definitely the furthest guest I've had so far. Please join me in welcoming Jeremy Nagel, software developer, multipreneur, and founder of FocusBear. Jeremy describes himself as a neurodivergent software developer turned startup founder who is passionate about helping other neurodivergent people thrive at work. He sold his last startup, Smooth Messenger, to Message Media in 2022 and still works at Message Media as a product manager. His latest startup, FocusBear, is an executive functioning enhancement system in the form of an app that helps people with ADHD and autism with productivity and work-life balance. Jeremy describes himself as someone who is slightly obsessed with habits. He likes to start each day with a 2.5-hour morning routine, and sometimes surprise his colleagues by riding his elliptical trainer during meetings to keep his energy up. When he's not working on startups, he enjoys cross-country skiing, trail running, and cycling with his wife. Why do I say that Jeremy's joining us from the furthest away? Well, Jeremy's joining us live via Zoom all the way from Australia. I've been looking forward to this conversation for months, so without further ado, please join us in welcoming Jeremy Nagel of FocusBear to our show. So, round of applause. So, yay! Welcome, Jeremy. Welcome.
Thanks for having me on. It's a real pleasure.
Oh, mine too. So, as you know, after we read the person's bio, everybody wants to know, well, okay, how did you get to the point that you are this multipreneur who's, founded at least your second company? So, what did you, Jeremy, start out wanting to be when you grew up?
When I was a kid, I really liked playing computer games. So I, at that stage, wanted to be a computer game programmer. I wanted to build my own games. I didn't really know how to do it, but I remember when I was probably about 8 or 9, there was this opportunity to get a special book in the mail, and I ordered a book about making computer games. And that really, it started the journey for me of learning how to build little games online. Oh. And then it turned out that it's quite hard to do a game. I did build a few little ones, but I think what was more in alignment with my career now was actually when I was playing a certain game called RuneScape. I grew bored with having to do all the clicking because in order to, for example, mine rocks or attack chickens, you had to do a lot of clicking everywhere. And I found this community of people who had figured out how to reverse engineer the game by writing code to control your character. So you'd get the little bot to go around clicking on the chickens for you, so I could be gathering feathers while I was sleeping. Wow. And that both led to me learning how to code and also developing an interest in automation in general, which I took into my career.
Okay. So how did you move into your career? So you found the inspiration, but how did you get to where you are now?
It really did lead from that experience with RuneScape that I developed quite good programming skills. People sometimes ask me what's the best way to learn to code, and I think the answer is to find something that you really care about deeply and write an app around that. And that's what I was doing, that I spent thousands of hours building these apps that would attack chickens for me or go and mine rocks. And it meant that I developed deep competency in Java. And it meant that even though I didn't actually get a university qualification in programming, I was already pretty good at it by the time I finished high school, and I was able to start doing freelance programming work.
Wow. Now, you mentioned that, I would even use the word advocate for neurodiverse. So what makes you unique from others who are doing similar work and activities?
Yeah, I would say it is my different neurotype, that I've been diagnosed with ADHD and autism. And that's something that I only had confirmed later in life, but I can really see how it colored my experience in my early career and in high school. Some of the social difficulties that I had in some ways helped me to develop my programming skills, because I wasn't really getting on well with other kids. So I spent more time online learning how to code. But it has meant that I often perceive things differently, and I see ideas, or I come up with ideas that other people might not miss. In fact, I sometimes overwhelm people with the volume of ideas. I had a job where they told me, stop giving us so many suggestions about how to improve the processes. We can't keep up with it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I could see where they probably felt like you were giving them a drink with a fire hose. So,
Yeah.
what would you say was your biggest learning opportunity so far?
I'd say one of the key ones from a business standpoint was actually having to close down one of my first businesses. I've had probably 5 or 6.
Wow.
One of the early ones was a Zoho consulting agency. I was helping businesses to set up Zoho CRM and Zoho Creator. And I grew that initially from me doing freelance work on Upwork.com, and I started getting quite a good track record there. Had a lot of clients, a lot of people offering me projects. And my ADHD brain has this idea that I can just do everything, because sometimes I get into hyperfocus and I can power through work in maybe 5 times faster than what other people can do it. However, that's quite exhausting and I can't necessarily keep it up. And I started to hire people to help me, but I didn't really learn how to train them correctly or onboard them. So I got into a situation where I had a large and expensive team that weren't really delivering the projects that clients needed us to deliver, and therefore they weren't paying, and I was getting into major cash flow issues, and I ended up incurring about $30,000 in credit card debt, which was a lot for me at the time. So that was my biggest lesson, that I really need to slow down the growth a bit and focus on onboarding the team, make sure that I've got people who are able to help me. And I have not taken on credit card debt since then. I think that's one of the key lessons.
Awesome. And, it's interesting because, you just mentioned 6 businesses. How did you find the courage? So many people, especially here in the United States, but around the world, don't have the courage to step out and start their own business the way you did. So how did you find the courage or the drive to go out and start your own businesses?
Naive impulsivity, I'd say, that I didn't really think too much about it. I think the question is more, how do I have the courage to keep going with it when my brain maybe gets tired with a particular type of business? And I think the answer to that is that I've realized I can't do it on my own, that even though I had major challenges with having a team, it also helps so much when I have the right people working with me. I find it very easy to keep going with the business. It feels enjoyable that I'm able to operate in my zone of competency, where I do the things that I'm really good at. I'm great at the high level and sometimes at the detail work, but rarely both at the same time. So I need to have people that I can delegate things to, and I find that works really well.
Awesome. And, what's one thing you wish you had known before you started on this multipreneur journey?
I wish I had known about my autism and my ADHD early on, because I got an autism pre-diagnosis about 7 years ago, but I think it really affected my early career. I don't think I mentioned that I got fired from my first 5 jobs in my early career. That might have been also why I was very open to having my own business, because it didn't seem like it was working that well working for other people. But a lot of that was due to some of the executive dysfunction that I had as a ADHD, as someone with both ADHD and autism, that I'd often get really immersed in a task that I was doing and then forget that I had a meeting with my boss, and that didn't necessarily go down well. now that I'm more advanced in my career, I have a bit more latitude in terms of being a bit quirky and eccentric. But in the early days, I think it's hard for people to embrace that when I didn't necessarily have any special skills at that point. So I wish I'd known a bit more about my brain so that I could have both dealt with some of the challenges that I have, but also given employers a heads up that, hey, I'm probably going to struggle with being on time for certain things. What can we do to make that not an issue? And how can, given that I often also am quite blunt with my communication, that was another reason why I got fired. How can I let people know that I'm not doing it because I hate them? It's just that at times I forget social niceties.
All right. And, you know, now I'm gonna just deviate for a second because one question that I didn't think to ask you that I really do want to ask you, your T-shirt, you know, says it all. And you've actually become an advocate in speaking up for yourself and others like you. Can you tell me, you know, what inspired you to speak out and speak up for people who are neurodivergent?
One of the key things that has inspired me there is like having awareness around the stats of unemployment rates for autistic people. It's quite common for people to have a similar experience to me of maybe getting jobs, maybe not being able to even get a job, not making it through the interview process, because that's often quite difficult for autistic people. The idea of doing it on the fly, answering all these questions, being in a strange environment, there's often not much success in getting through those early stages, and then certainly after that, remaining employed is a real challenge. And I see that as a major loss to the working world, that we've got people who research indicates that when they are in a job, they can be tremendously effective, just like me. Often we have a lot of ideas that can make things better. We can be great at identifying process improvements. Mm-hmm. So I really see there's a lot of talent being left on the table, and that's why I want to advocate for other people so that we can have a working world which is more inclusive. And I'm not saying that we should 100% hire neurodivergent people. I think we need a mixture. The neurodiversity that exists in broader society, where we've got maybe 20% of people who are neurodivergent, I think we should look to have that ratio in our workforce as well, instead of it's probably more like 8% who are employed neurodivergent people.
Believe it or not, it's time for us to take a mid-show break. So for all of our viewers, please come back after this brief message from our sponsors for more with Jeremy Nagel of Focus Bear and What the Why with Barbara Ann on RVN Television. Welcome back to What the Why with Barbara Ann on RVN Television, and today's very special guest joining us all the way from Australia, Jeremy Nagel, the founder of Focus Bear and multipreneur. And right before the break, we were talking about some of the work he does around, representation and advocating for people who are neurodiverse or neurodivergent. And, it's interesting because so many people who go into engineering and especially in the tech field, I'm finding are somewhere on the neurodivergent spectrum. And, more so than not, to be honest. So, to your point, there needs to be more of accommodations in order to be able to meet the needs of obviously brilliant people. Although having been fired multiple times might have, as you said, contributed to you starting your own company. What are some of the resources that helped you along the way in terms of building these companies?
The major one I'd like to point out is a conference called MicroConf, which is a conference based in the US, but they have a community that I access where it's all about digital entrepreneurship. It's a lot of people like me who are programmers who've figured out how to do the marketing side of running a business. And that's been very helpful for me because a lot of those skills I didn't have. I knew how to write code, but I didn't necessarily know how to get ideas out there. So I'd highly recommend that to anyone who's wanting to start a digital business.
Mm-hmm. And who would you say are, 2 or 3 people who have been most influential for you in your journey?
2 people called Rob. One is Rob Wiblin, who is the founder of 80,000 Hours, which is a website that talks about how can you make the most impact with your career. 80,000 hours is the typical amount of time that we end up working throughout our lifetimes. And that website is affiliated with Effective Altruism, which is the idea that with the limited resources that we have available, which problems should we focus on? Which ones are the most in need of help? Which ones are actually solvable? And which ones are being neglected right now? I found that quite influential for me in terms of deciding what type of cause areas I want to focus on in my life. And the other Rob is Rob Walling, who is the founder of MicroConf, and he's written a few books as well about how to start a business that isn't necessarily going to be a $1 billion business, that might be a $1 million business, for example, and enough to really impact a lot of people's lives and provide a decent amount of income for the team.
Oh, wow, I definitely want to check that out, because there is such a perception out there that you must be a $1 billion business, and do you really need to do that? Let me figure out what question I would like to ask. What do you hope for in the future in terms of however you interpret that question?
Yeah, it's a broad question. I could interpret it on a macro level, thinking about what I'm hoping for. I'd love there to be a world where we don't have as much poverty, that we have more peace. It feels like there's a lot of world conflict going on right now. Yeah. And also I'm a big advocate for dealing with climate change and taking some action there. So that's what I'd like at a macro level. And I think that flows down to my personal life as well, that I'd like to have a peaceful life and not to have too much conflict with my colleagues and with my wife and people around me, to have a lot of harmony and generally to have good health. I'm at the moment trying to get into a lot of ocean swimming, and I find that's something that gives me a lot of peace and a lot of joy from doing that. So I'd hope to one day be able to swim maybe 4 kilometers. Right now I can swim about 1 kilometer.
Wow, wow.
That's maybe 2.5 miles of swimming.
Yeah, no, and my mind immediately went to all of the Animal Planet shows that we see here about the sharks in Australia. So I was like, oh my gosh, that's such a brave thing to want to do.
I live in a part of Australia that doesn't have many sharks, thankfully, but we do have some jellyfish from time to time. I have to wear a special stinger suit so I don't get stung.
You know, I never thought about the fact that there would be a need for a stinger suit. That's really interesting. If you were the one doing the interview, what question would you have asked yourself that I didn't?
I would ask, what are the major strengths that I might have? Because I guess I've spoken about some of the challenges, and in the break before we were talking about how the labels can have really negative connotations.
Agreed.
But when you think about someone who's autistic or ADHD, you probably think of someone who doesn't have their life together and is really struggling. But yeah, I think it's important to hear about success stories as well, that there are a lot of people who have been they've done very well in their careers or in their businesses. Elon Musk has come out and said that he's on the autistic spectrum, and Bill Gates also. Richard Branson is dyslexic. There's a lot of people, Michael Phelps, the Olympic swimmer, there's a lot of people who have been very successful and who have different brains. And I think it's important to hear about that as well, that it's not a death sentence, or it doesn't mean that if a child or someone you know has recently been diagnosed that their life is going to be gloomy, that there are a lot of potential positive things that will come out of it as well.
Agreed. Thank you. Because yes, so a friend of mine who is also a coach client has a very important role in the federal government for equal opportunity housing, and she uses, because you can use different labels at different points, and she's diagnosed and continues to refer to herself as having Asperger's, which is also on that spectrum. And in her most recent performance evaluations, and she's been with this federal agency for years, she got outstandings and excellence across the board. So I guess as we start to wrap up the interview, what's one myth about your industry or profession, or however you would like to interpret this question, that you would like to clear up or debunk?
One myth I'd like to clear up is that in order to start a business, you need to hire 10 people and lease a shop and have a massive website and business cards and things like that. I really love another resource called The Lean Startup, which is a book by Eric Ries. Yes. And he talks about how in order to start a business, all you need to do is potentially just talk to 10 people and ask them what problems they have. And it may be that in order to solve their problems, you can do it in a really low-tech way. And that's something that's important for me to remember, because as a programmer, I have a bias towards building apps when actually it might be better to do something really low-tech. It may be better to just do coaching with them instead, and that may have more impact up front. And then over time, as I learn more about the problem, I can then start building an app as I know exactly what the problems to solve are.
Awesome. Well, believe it or not, we are pretty much at time. So my last question for you is, what is the best way for people to connect with you?
I'm on LinkedIn. So if you search for Jeremy Nagel on LinkedIn, or go to focusbear.io, which is the app I've been building, and use the contact us form there. Awesome.
So Jeremy, thank you so much for our viewers. It's actually already Tuesday where Jeremy is. We started this interview, and we're recording it on a Monday afternoon. So thank you so much for starting your day and taking the time to share, your unique journey, your brilliance, and your personal story as well with all of us. You really are inspirational, and please, keep representing. That's all I can say is keep representing.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. So now going forward, as for our upcoming guests, you really don't want to miss any of our conversations. We've got more business owners and coaches and authors and tech experts and entrepreneurs and military veterans and people who almost all of them across the board overcame seemingly insurmountable challenges. So tune in and be inspired by how they did what they did and how you can motivate yourself to get going. And if you missed our past guests and want to check out what they had to say, you can also catch all of seasons 1 and 2 on demand on the What the Why page of RVN Television's website and Roku. These days you have so many viewing choices, so thank you very much for watching our show, and please tell a friend or colleague about us. As a reminder, What the Why now airs exclusively on demand 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on RVN Television as well as Roku. And also please remember, whether you're looking to make changes in your life or your career or your business, no matter how big or small, tune in for more inspirational, informative, and really educational conversations with guests like Jeremy, who overcame whatever challenges laid in their paths, whether real or perceived, to move forward, find their purpose, and live it.